Which one is for you? Ricoh GR3X or the Fujifilm XT30 Mark II for street and travel photography? That is a question I'm hoping to answer for you in this little episode. So let's get right into it. The Ricoh GR3X has a 24 megapixel CMOS sensor, whereas the Fuji XT30 Mark II has a 26.2 megapixel sensor. This camera weighs 275 grams. This weighs 383 grams, including the battery, not including the lens I'm using here, which is the 27mm f2.8. This is the first version, so it doesn't have an aperture ring, and this has a 28mm APS-C lens into it, which roughly is 40mm in full frame. Which the elephant in the room here is the XT30 has a flippy screen here, a tiltable screen, 1.6 million dots, whereas the Ricoh has a 1.3 million dots fixed screen. That's a big difference. Obviously, the Fujifilm XT30 has this lovely viewfinder, whereas in the Ricoh, this is optional, so you use your screen as your viewfinder. Also, the Fujifilm has a burst rate of 8 frames per second, mechanical 30 frames per second. Electronic, the Ricoh GR3X doesn't have this. Fuji XT30 has a built-in little flash. The Ricoh GR3X doesn't. You can have this optional. You'll see here both of these cameras are not weather sealed. One of the key things here in the Ricoh is that it comes in with an internal memory of 2 gigs, and as far as I know, no Fuji camera has this. It also comes in with its own IBIS. It's hard to believe you can put it into this small form factor. It has a built-in neutral density filter, which of course if you have a fixed lens is a lot easier to do. The Fuji has none of it. Additionally, one of the features many street photographers like, travel photographers maybe not, but street photographers, is a feature which is called snap focus, which basically means you can tell your lens on what distance to focus. You set your aperture and away you snap. You can obviously do this manually on the XT30 Mark II as well, but it's just going to take you a little bit more time. And this little snap focus, I don't use it much, to be very honest. I've dabbled with it, but I'm still trying to get the right feel for it, if you want. Both of these cameras have touch screens, where I have to admit that here on the Ricoh, it is a full-blown touchscreen, whereas the Fujifilm XT30 Mark II has 3 options. You can easily switch it on, you can shoot with it, and you can zone focus with it. So I personally really like this feature as well, although I do have to admit that the Ricoh 30 GR series is a little bit more advanced. What these cameras have in common, and that's I think a big selling point, both of them have their own film simulations, and both cameras render excellent, unique color science. There is no winner here, there is no loser here, both of them are excellent. The biggest difference is that the Fujifilm XT30 Mark II will allow you to store up to 7 different film recipes, including naming them, and unfortunately on the Ricoh you only have 2 slots and you can't name them. So it depends a bit on what your liking is, but both of these in terms of color and film recipes, you can get them from Fuji Weekly or Ricoh Weekly or many other sites. I think these are fantastic. What is your opinion? Do you prefer the color science on the Ricoh or the color science on the Fuji? Let me know in the comments below. Another additional thing here which you have on the Ricoh, and this kind of makes it very interesting. First of all, you have a macro mode, as you can see here, macro off, macro on. Then you also have something which I find arbitrary, and I need, or I would appreciate your help here. You got cropping mode, and the cropping modes are 50mm and 71mm, which is great. You can crop in on your JPEG, but here's the thing that I have with that, and let me know what you think. You can crop into a 50mm and a 71mm, but the characteristics you're having of the lens, so in terms of compression, doesn't change. So I find this a nice gimmick. Let me know in the comments below. Another point is, how easy are these cameras to operate? Well, this is a point and shoot, and this you can turn into a point and shoot, but it's a little bit versatile. I would say if it comes to the customizations and menu options, both of them offer plenty, but I find the Fujifilm XT30 Mark II a lot easier to operate. If you're a beginner, I would advise you to go for a Fujifilm camera because the Ricoh is great. It's got so much customizations and so much menus into it, but knowing them all and navigating your way around can be a bit tricky. Whoa, oh help, it didn't break. Then there's the autofocus. And I do feel in my experiences that the Fujifilm XT30 Mark II actually wins this for the very simple reason that on the Ricoh GR3X, you have one thing: if you're underexposed, specifically in bright daylight, this camera can easily miss focus, and I've had that a lot. So that snap focus distancing could actually be a savior here. Let me know what you think, and let me know if you have the same issues as I have. And when it comes to the battery life, I would say this goes to the Fujifilm XT30 as well, because the battery is simply rated for 350 shots, whereas the Ricoh is rated for 259 shots. Now, the way that I use the Ricoh is as an everyday camera. I almost always carry it with me, and I carry this a lot as well, but it's just a very different feeling. And I think when you're an everyday shooter, I don't take 200 to 300 pictures a day, do you? So then you know that one battery lasts you for quite long, but if you go on a day shooting, yeah, bring 3 or 4. It's very simple. Both of these cameras you can, by the way, charge via USB. The Fuji, I normally have one spare battery with me. Let me know what you think. Now, when it comes to the build quality, again, I think that the Fujifilm is a little bit more robuster. You know, if I look at this little camera, like the Ricoh, the front is good, the lens is very well designed. When you go to the back screen, it's sufficiently lit, but it's these buttons here. And I see a lot here on YouTube that they break down. I, thank God, don't have it, but I see here on my button here, it's slowly getting pushed in. Let's see how that really goes. So I really find, for the Ricoh, I find that a little bit of a fragile point. Another thing which I think the Fuji outshines the Ricoh on is the quality of the actual LCD screen. It's not even the tilt function, it's the quality of it. The Fujifilm has a 1.6 million dots and the Ricoh has a 1.034 million dots. And practically speaking, the most important feature on my Ricoh is this here, the exposure meter. And in bright daylight, even when I turn up the screen resolution to high, it's sometimes really difficult to see. And when you have a camera without a viewfinder, which is designed that way, the screen needs to be very good. And I think here that Ricoh could have done a better job. Another common thing is where I think the Fuji is less fragile in, is a well-known issue with the Ricoh, is that there's dust on the sensor. And since it is a fixed lens, you're gonna have to send it over to Ricoh. And those dust spots, you can only see them when you shoot on f8, f9 and higher. It's kind of a shame. I wish if the Ricoh GR4 series would come out, that this would be a little bit better weather sealed. Where I think that the Fujifilm XT30, of course, dust is our biggest enemy. I think this is a little bit less fragile. And you know, if your sensor has dust on it, you just take your lens off and you clean it. It's not that difficult. When it comes to low light photography, guess who I think is the best? This, the Ricoh, or the Fuji? I can honestly state it's the Fuji, and that's got everything to do with the fact that this sensor, although smaller than the one on the XT30 Mark II, has a thicker pixels, and that makes it you have less noise, much to my own surprise, in low light and sharper images. I was really surprised in difficult, challenging light in bars and stuff, how well the Ricoh performed. The Fuji, by the way, performs well in low light because you can shoot onto higher ISOs, ISO 6400. Don't be afraid of it to shoot with it. Even to 12,000 you can, then you get a little bit of noise, but you can easily either denoise it or you can see it as kind of a film grain. So I think that both of these cameras are very good, but I have to say this goes to the Ricoh. When it comes to the actual use of it for street photography and travel photography, and here is the biggest thing. Of course, this has an interchangeable lens, and if you follow this channel, you know that I love to shoot with narrow focal lengths. So for me, this is perfect for travel and for street photography. I think if you want to have an everyday camera or a street photography camera that's light in your pocket, carries a punch, I would always say go for the Ricoh, even when you know it has a problem with dust, even if you know that the screen isn't that good. But I would say the ease here for anonymous street photography is fantastic. Normally I tend to shoot like this, so I kind of get a Dutch angle, which I like. For travel photography, and this is specific, I would normally tend to go with the Fuji. Very simply put, both of these cameras are not weather sealed, but I really feel that the Fuji is a lot less fragile for dust, sand, you know, when you're at the beach or you're, for instance, walking around in a desert somewhere, mountain hiking. I feel this is a little bit more safe and robust because you can also clean your sensor even. But I also think that these cameras are a little bit more versatile. They're not only for street photography or travel photography. You can use this in various different things. Street portraits are good, or portraits in general. Product you can do on the Ricoh. Of course, here you have the benefit with the Fujifilm that you have that interchangeable lens mount. And I think that the form factor, specifically when you shoot with bigger lenses, I'm not even talking about the 90mm, but the big zoom lenses, I think this form factor is a little bit too small. I would always go from an XT1 until 5 series because they just have a better grip. They're a little bit better balanced with those lenses. Let me know what you think.